Hey guys, it's Ross from The Daily Jaws. I hope you're well. Today we've got a really cool video because I am joined by our good friend Kristian Parton from Shark Bites, and we are going to try and answer a very important question. Could a shark the size of Jaws actually exist? So Kristian, before we dive into the main question, tell us a little bit about Shark Bites.
Well, thanks first of all for having me on again, Ross. It's always great to feature on the Daily Jaws. Yeah, Shark Bites is a sharky YouTube channel dedicated to everything sharky. So we've got loads of different types of videos on there. We tend to do a lot of movie commentaries where I basically sit down and watch shark films and commentate on them, a little bit of a pinch of salt with those ones. But then we do new research videos. So all the kind of new research that's coming out on sharks across the world. We do creature features on lots of different shark species. So yeah, Shark Bites is, of course, a channel for anyone who loves everything about sharks, really.
Good stuff. Well, this is a perfect collab because, as I say, we've got a great question that we want to sort of pick your brains about. So ultimately, we're going to try and figure out, could a shark the size of the shark in Jaws actually exist? And I thought what we should probably do is just start with what we know about the shark from Jaws. So there's a couple of sources that we can look at. We can obviously look at the original book, which was written by Peter Benchley. He himself was somewhat of an expert on sharks, not necessarily sort of a scientist, but he loved sort of the water and became a sort of a great sort of conservationist sort of after Jaws. So he did sort of know his stuff, even though the book doesn't go into a huge amount of detail. And then obviously there's the movie as well, where you've obviously got Hooper, the shark expert, and Quint, the shark hunter, who are both kind of giving us their take on the shark. And when Hooper and Quint sort of first see the shark, they sort of very quickly assess the size of it. So Hooper will jump straight in and go, "That's a 20-footer," and then Quint goes, "Actually, that's 25."
That's a 20-footer.
25. 3 tons on.
And that's a 3-ton shark. And then obviously you see it swim by and it looks huge. And in the movie, the actual shark that was built for it was 25 feet in length. The book was, I think in one part of the book, I think there's someone that sort of describes the shark as the size of a station wagon, which would have been sort of around 14 to 15 feet. So obviously we're talking about a really, really large great white shark, and we've got some sort of really interesting stats around sort of sharks as they are now, sort of the biggest sharks that have ever been recorded and also misidentified. But I mean, under sort of what sort of circumstances would a shark that size need in order to grow to get to that size? Where might be a really good place for a shark like that to grow? Where would it need to be, and what sort of food supply would it need, and how much would it be eating?
I mean, it's got to be in a place where there is, of course, lots of food. So the things that determine growth are your environment, where you're living, what you're eating. So you've got to be in a place there that has a very, very big food supply. So you're talking probably a large seal colony, but that's where we know great white sharks hang out anyway. So, generally your average great white shark, I would say, is probably somewhere between kind of 13 and 15 feet long, right? That's your average. So those type of sharks are sharks that you're going to get really commonly. Obviously, there are bigger individuals. We know that. That's happens. Sometimes they're getting up towards kind of like 18, 19, 20 feet long. But a shark that kind of size, even the sort of 18, 19, 20 foot ones, are still going to need to be in a place where there's a big food source. So we know that sharks feed on, when they're juveniles, generally it's a more fish-based diet. And then as they start getting towards adults, they move across to meat in terms of like seal blubber or perhaps whale carcasses, things like that. Their diet generally tends to shift. So they're going to need to be in a place where there is a lot of food, because, the more you eat, the bigger you are, the more you're going to need to eat. So they need to be in a place, first of all, where there's a large seal colony, probably.
Yeah, I mean, again, my knowledge of sharks is getting better. You'll be pleased to know I'm reading more books. But yeah, what you're saying it seems to be absolutely right. Sharks of that sort of size, they need some sort of very high calorie diet, and obviously things like a seal is going to offer that.
I think I jotted a few things, a little bit of a maths equation down before we jumped on this call, and it's based on sort of actual research that I think was published back in about 2013, so a little while ago now, nearly 10 years ago. But the research back then, I think it's said a 1-ton great white shark is going to need to eat approximately 30 kilograms of blubber every 12 days. So this research was basically evolving or expanding, on some research that had been done back in the 80s, where they thought a 1-ton shark would need to eat 30 kilograms of blubber every 40 days or something like that. But this new research was like, actually, no, it's much less. So then if we start doing some little kind of maths equations with that, a 2-ton shark is going to need to eat 30 kilograms of blubber every 6 days, which is half the amount, because we're doubling the tonnage of the shark. Then we go to a 3-ton shark, which is going to need to eat 30 kilograms of blubber every 3 days. So we're looking at that kind of amount of food every 3 days, which is quite a lot. Then we can look at perhaps the weight of an average, let's say a Cape fur seal, something a white shark might be feeding on, particularly a Cape fur seal pup. So the pups are probably weighing somewhere between 7 and 10 kilograms each, and that's what white sharks feed on most commonly. They feed on those young individuals who maybe aren't quite ocean wise yet and are out and about, and that's what they tend to hit. They tend to hit those seal pups. So if we're saying Cape fur seal pup is about 7 to 10 kilograms, that means that a 3-ton great white shark is going to need to eat somewhere between 3 and 4 Cape fur seal pups every 3 days. So wow. That kind of, we're talking those kind of numbers there, which is a lot. Then when we look at great white sharks and their success rates when they're hunting, they're actually only successful 50% of the time. So 50% of the time that they're out hunting, they will get food. 50% of the time they won't. They'll miss, the seal will get away. So these kind of numbers that we're talking about to sustain an individual that is 3 tons, let's say 25 feet, whatever, the amount that they're going to have to feed is extortionate. It's too much. The great white shark has to do other things as well. It has to have time for resting. It has to have time for mating. It can't feed constantly. Okay, it starts to get a little bit different when we're saying, right, this great white shark's found a whale carcass where it can just gorge itself for days on that. That's a little bit different. But finding a whale carcass for a shark is, again, a rarity. That they don't predominantly feed on whale carcasses. It's more of a chance encounter. They predominantly feed on seal pups. So if they were predominantly feeding on seal pups, then this 3-ton great white shark is going to have to eat a lot of seal pups. That's a seal pup a day, basically, if we're thinking about that like that.
And the most interesting thing about that, because that does seem like a lot of food for an animal, regardless of the species, whether it's a shark or not. There was another calculation done where they said that if a great white shark did hit 25 feet long, it would probably be closer to 5 tons.
That's amazing.
So, which is just insane. I think the exact figure was something like 4.9 tons. So when you put that into perspective based on the calculations that you've just done, that shark it's never going to stop eating, is it?
No, exactly. It has to eat. I mean, if we're talking a 5-ton shark, then this shark is going to be eating multiple meals a day to be able to sustain that. Because I think the calculations they did as well were they were trying to work out, well, how much energy does a white shark expend? And they did that via sort of swimming speeds and, how much energy it expends when it's hunting and, shooting to the surface, doing those amazing breaches, all that kind of stuff. So the calculations they did in that paper were pretty cool. Now, I don't know if any work has been done since then. That was probably the most famous paper that I could think of that came out back about 10 years ago. I'm sure there would be some recent stuff. I just didn't manage to find it in time for this video, but there might have been some updates on that. But from what I know, those are the calculations.
Well, I did a little bit of research as well just before our call, just to get a feel for the type of sort of the big sharks that have been caught or recorded. And here's some information. Now, this is obviously going back a couple of 100 years, so mistakes are going to be made, but I'll read this basically verbatim. So the Guinness Book of World Records listed 2 specimens of great white sharks as the largest. The first was a 10.9 meter or 36-foot shark, which was caught in the 1870s in Australian waters near Port Fairy. The other was found trapped in herring weir in New Brunswick in Canada in the 1930s. This shark was reportedly measured even bigger at 11.3, which is 37 feet. But in 1970, someone called J.E. Randall examined the jaws of the Port Fairy shark, confirming that it was a mistake in the measurement. This was the shark back in 1870. The shark was actually much smaller, probably about 5 meters. So quite how they've miscalculated that by so much, I don't know. But the New Brunswick shark was actually misidentified as a basking shark, but having a very sort of similar shape to a great white. Although even then, how they would mistake a basking shark for a great white is a bit of a question. But again, I guess, the amount of information or the ability to record sharks and stuff like that was limited in those days. However, the Canadian Shark Research Centre has confirmed a female caught by David McKendrick off Prince Edward Island in 1988 was measured at 6.1 meters or 20 feet in length. And obviously, we now know that there is a shark that's reportedly 20 feet long called Deep Blue. Where you've got lots of sort of conservationists actually sort of swimming alongside her. I think at the time, a lot of the video footage of Deep Blue, she was pregnant at the time. So I don't think she was particularly sort of up for the hunt or out to sort of cause any sort of big fuss. And she looked very chill, very relaxed around the divers. So 20 feet seems to be about the biggest size that we've come across so far. Although if there are any sort of larger sharks out there that I might have missed in terms of my research, please let us know in the comments, because we would love to hear about them. But obviously Jaws is, just another sort of 5 feet longer. I mean, that's huge. Sort of 50 years ago, where would a shark like that, where would it normally be found? Because obviously it's found its way to Amity Island, which is sort of Martha's Vineyard. It doesn't seem particularly like a great feeding ground, although obviously when it's summer, people are always going to be in the water. So where would we potentially find a shark of that size at that time? Any ideas?
It's tough to say. I mean, a big shark like that, you're talking about open ocean type stuff there. But again, like we discussed previously about the amount of food that shark's got to eat and how regularly that shark's got to eat, I still think a large shark has to be somewhere near a very, very plentiful food source. That's the only place I can see it being able to survive, definitely.
And I guess looking at the timetable for Jaws, the shark in Jaws is eating almost every day that we know of. Anyway, it's eating children, dogs, adults, boats. It's sort of eating everything. So, and I'm assuming, because obviously, you say the average adult. Let me see, because I'm 160 pounds. I'm about 70 kilograms. So that would be actually not a bad food supply for a shark potentially.
Although that's the thing, we are much bonier than what a Cape fur seal might be. We've got barely any blubber on us. We're basically like something a seagull might find in a bin in comparison to a Cape fur seal. So that's the thing, while we might be 70 kilograms or whatever, a lot of us is bone and not actual sort of meat. So even let's say the shark decided to eat people for sustenance, it's going to need to eat lots and lots of people to be able to sustain itself.
Yeah, very true. But then again, it didn't go for, because right at the beginning of the beach scene, or one of the first beach scenes where Alex Kintner gets killed, #spoiler, the first thing that we kind of see is a very, very large woman walking into the water, and I think it's just Spielberg having a bit of a joke. But you kind of think, well, why didn't the shark go for her? But then the shark did actually go for Alex Kintner when he was on the raft, and probably mistook him for something much larger than he was. So yeah, okay, so maybe some of the science behind Jaws actually is still pretty accurate. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting because for me, 25 feet is just a little bit too far. And I know there'll be a few people in the comments when this video comes out say, well, if there's one that's sort of 21, 22 feet, then it's not that much further away. But I just think it's just slightly on the large side. I can see a great white shark being perhaps 21 to 22 feet in terms of its maximum size. I can see that. I just can't see 25. It's just a bit too much of a stretch. And people say, well, you don't know that, you can't know it for sure. And no, they're right. You can't know it for sure. No one can know it for sure until we find a 25-foot great white shark. But for now, that's the thing. We can only base it on the information that we have now. And the longest reliably measured white was probably about 19, 20 feet long. That's where we're sitting. Even deep blue. So she's not been accurately measured because she's been in and around the water. So it's very, very difficult to measure the size of things when they're in the water. You have to estimate it. Okay, you can use sort of laser photogrammetry. I'm not sure if anyone has done some laser photogrammetry on deep blue sea, which is basically where you have a machine that points two lasers at an equal distance apart, and then you can calculate the length of that section based on the distance. Again, some complicated maths on it, but that's what, for example, whale shark scientists use to try and get the sizes of whale sharks. They use laser photogrammetry sets. So I don't think deep blue's been laser photogrammetry, but people have tried to estimate it, and they've said somewhere between maybe kind of 21 feet ish. But again, it's only an estimate, and people generally, no matter sort of what they do, aren't that good at estimating the sizes of megafauna when they're in the water. It's tough. So I'm pretty sure some research was done that showed that I think it was members of the public and crew on, for example, let's say megafauna wildlife watching tours. So members of the public and the crew of that ship were not as good at estimating the sizes of sharks from boats compared to actual scientific experts. So I think that members of the public and crew were generally about half a meter, maybe slightly more out from the estimates, which, when you think about it, that's still a fair whack out from the estimation. The people generally aren't that good at estimating the sizes of things when they're in the water. So for all we know, and I'm not aware of deep blue being measured accurately yet, or with lasers, laser photogrammetry. But for all we know, deep blues might not even be 22 feet long. Oh, I'm getting a call. There we go.
That's someone phoning up going, no, it's actually been done. She's 20 feet long.
It's actually been done. Yeah, that's what I was about to say. No, I did that last week.
I mean, it's interesting that you say that, because obviously as well, we've got to take into account the shark's age, because obviously, for a shark to reach to 25 feet long or even 20 feet long, it's got to be quite old. So what can you tell us about sort of the growth pattern, now that we've got a better idea of kind of how much it would need to eat and what it would need to eat? How long would it need to sustain that in order to sort of approach that 25 feet long?
So with great white shark growth and sort of their age stuff, initially when they are juveniles, they grow at a fairly constant rate and fairly quickly as well. And then when they get to sort of that mature adult stage, it starts to slow down a bit. So when we're talking about these, big sharks that are coming up to sort of 19, 20 feet long, we know that for a while, they have been growing at a pretty slow rate. So if we're thinking about a shark that's 19, 20 feet long, it could be upwards of kind of 60 plus years old. Then when we go to sort of the hypothetical 25, you could be talking about a shark that's probably over 70, maybe 80 years old even. Again, this is hypothetical here, but these are old sharks. So the ones that are sort of those kind of really, really large sizes are going to be, well over 60 years old, I would say.
I was going to say, because if you've got a shark that's, say, sort of 60 years old, or even just a species of animal that's 60 years old that's massively hunted, or in this case, sort of fished, on an industrial scale, do you think that, a shark, maybe not 25 feet long, but, the sort of the high end of the scale, do you think they're still out there? Do you think, there are big fish still out there, or do you think we're getting to them too quickly? We're fishing them before they've had a chance to really sort of grow? Because obviously deep blue is, to my mind, or memory anyway, is probably the only shark out there that I've seen or that I know of that's sort of 20 feet long. Obviously there are sharks that we probably haven't seen yet, but do you think that there are still quite a few big fish out there, or do you think we're getting to them too quickly in terms of the fishing and all that kind of stuff?
It's a tough one. I think with kind of sort of like how old these sharks can get. I mean, if we go back in time, so we go back into the sort of 60s, 70s, 80s, that's where you were getting these reports of these massive sharks. Okay, some of the sort of size estimates might not be as reliable as we think they are, but the reports back then were big sharks, 19, 20, 21 feet long. And it seems today we aren't finding perhaps as many bigger sharks as we used to. So if you were looking at that on the surface, you might say, well, okay, there's not many big sharks around anymore. It's possible. Whether fishing is having an effect on it, I'm not sure. I think the sharks have pretty much always been around the same size, their average size, somewhere between, I don't know, 13 and 15 feet long-ish. And that's the average. And I think they've always been like that. And then every now and again, of course, you get some sharks that buck the trend and go above average towards 19, 20 feet. But I don't think fishing has played a role in the kind of shrinking of shark size, so to say. I think there was an article that came out fairly recently. I think it was a Guardian article that was talking about mega sharks and how I think they were basing it off some kind of Nat Geo Shark Fest documentary or whatever that was basically saying that the great white sharks are taking advantage of no fishing zones and are eating loads of things within that no fishing zone and getting to massive sizes. I don't buy that at all. I think I'm pretty sure that article is nonsense, and I couldn't find any sort of research papers to back up what they were saying. I couldn't find any quotes from someone in that article, and it got shared quite widely because it's a Guardian article, and Guardian likes to every now and again write decent quality pieces on sharks compared to some of the other newspapers. But this one, I'm not sure it checked out to me. I don't think fishing is having, or lack of fishing there is having a role on determining the size of sharks. I think they've always been about what they are, the average, and then you'll get individuals that are above average. You'll also get individuals that are below average as well. So it's just the way it kind of works from that kind of scale.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's just nature, isn't it? Everything comes in all different shapes and sizes, doesn't it? So I guess it's just to sort of hedge the bets a little bit in terms of just survival of the species. So yeah, okay. Well, we've got one last question for you, Kristian. Now, I'm a big fan of this, and this is one that comes up occasionally. It's a little bit conspiracy theory, but I like it. So obviously we've talked about the shark from Jaws purely from the great white shark perspective. It's possible it would be 25 feet long, but we kind of understand what it would take now to get a sort of great white shark to that size and the amount of time it would take. So how about this? Is it possible that the shark in Jaws has possibly been misidentified and it's maybe a baby Meg, or is it some kind of great white Meg half breed? What about that? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we are going into conspiracy here, definitely. No, it's definitely not a baby Meg. We know that megalodons have been extinct for millions and millions of years, about 3.6 million to be precise, if you can be precise with that. So it's definitely not a baby Meg. And then in terms of whether it's a sort of Meg great white hybrid, I'm not quite sure that would work. I mean, they did exist at points around the same time. Okay, it was the great white ancient ancestors, and great whites have changed a little bit since then, but great white's ancestors did occupy the same kind of territory and ecological niche as megalodons did back when they were alive millions of years ago. As to whether they could combine and breed and create some kind of cross hybrid thing, I'm not sure. I mean, it would suggest that in the film then there's a megalodon around somewhere that's mated with a great white shark to create the Jaws shark, which I'm saying no megalodons around, no megalodons capable of doing that. I get very angry about megalodons.
I'm feeling the rage through the call.
I get it, honestly, on shark bites all the time. I do little kind of reaction videos to the videos you see on the internet that claim that Megalodon is still alive, and his 10 Megalodon proof videos, and some of those I am pure fuming in. So even the word Megalodon now just kind of like, it gets in my head and I'm like, oh no, it's not.
Oh man, you shouldn't have told me that, because now I'm just going to troll you. I've got your mobile number, remember? So I'm just going to send you Meg stuff all the time now. Oh man, the thing is, for me, I mean, I think, yeah, Jaws is definitely, or the shark from Jaws is definitely a great white shark. I mean, Hooper has identified its tooth, and he's really sort of clear on what the species is. I like the idea of it potentially being some kind of special hybrid kind of thing, but then I think it kind of takes away from the realism of what Jaws is trying to do with the particular shark. It's just a shark. It doesn't represent all sharks. It's just a freak of nature when it comes to the shark population. But now that we understand how much it needs to eat, how frequently it needs to eat, and potentially how old it is, and what it needs to do in order to sustain its existence from its pure size, we kind of understand why the shark is so aggressive and constantly coming back to the same feeding area and eating and eating and eating and eating, and it will attack boats and sink them if it has to do that. So we've kind of, I think, explained a little bit about the behavior of the shark from Jaws, as well as just whether its size would be real. Because if it was this size, if it is sort of a 25-foot 3-ton shark, or even a 5-ton shark, if that's what actually a 25-foot great white shark would actually weigh, it explains a lot of the behavior. So I think actually this has been a much more beneficial conversation. So this has been awesome.
Always happy to help, Ross. Always happy to
mate,
help.
These are the things that keep me up at night. These are the things that keep me up at night. Honestly, they really do. I just sit and I wonder. I just think, could it really exist? And now we've answered that question. So now I can go back to getting some sleep. But then I'll give you a message and let you know what the next question is when I start losing some more sleep. In terms of a shark, or a great white shark specifically, sort of the size of Jaws, taking that 25-foot size, what do you think, given the movie is sort of set 50 years ago and there were sort of plenty of big fish sort of in the ocean at that time? What do you think? Do you think that would be possible?
I think in science, we can never say never, first of all. That's very important. You can never say never. We've been shown so many times to be wrong in science, and, new data comes to light. So it's possible, but I think it's very, very unlikely. I mean, we're talking, I mean, I don't want to give any numbers on it, but 1 in a million type stuff. This is going to be an incredibly rare thing to happen, in my opinion, anyway.
Well, Kristian, it's a pleasure as always to have you on the Daily Jaws. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll put a link to your Shark Bites channel in the description of this video. This video will be going live in a couple of days. It's normally customary for me to leave the last word for the guest before signing off. So is there anything else you'd like to add or say to the viewers?
Good one. I usually go with a little Shark Bites plug here when I feature on these collabs, but instead I'm going to go with farewell and adieu.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. I've been Ross for the Daily Jaws with Kristian Parton from Shark Bites. We'll drink to your legs, and farewell and adieu. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. If you'd like to know more about Jaws, please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok and Twitter. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and visit our website, thedailyjaws.com. Until next time, we drink to your legs. Farewell and adieu.